You guys, remember when we were concerned about Interview with a Vampire? This has no business being this good. This is fantastic. I only watched episode 1, so spoilers. Oh my god. I'm Abby with MotorCityNerds, and hi to new subscribers, welcome. We're almost to 1,000, I can't believe it, thank you so much. If you could hit the like button, that would really help me out a lot. It's free, and yeah. But, oh my god, all of my concerns, and all the concerns all of it, like anybody had about this, all just went away after. I mean, I didn't watch episode 2, and I know that if you have AMC Plus, which I don't have, I don't know if I can do that through Comcast, but either way, the second episode's out on AMC Plus. But I only watched episode 1, and, okay, Tom Cruise, him as Lestat is one of my favorite portrayals of a character of all time. I've read this book. I've read a couple of the Vampire Chronicles. There's 16 books total. I like that we had nods to witches, and I was like, oh man, are you going to tie this all in? Because like I said, this is very smart, because if they play their cards right, they could do the Anne Rice-averse, and there's a lot to go off of. Lestat's been around for thousands of years, Armand, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to get into it, but this episode was so damn good. We get a nod to the book, and we find out that this isn't the first interview he had. It's the second. Now, I liked the movement of time. I also like the way they used COVID without calling it COVID. I like the way they used a pandemic. They used that very well, unlike other shows that are like kind of force-feeding it to you. This show actually uses it well in the plot. Like, it works, but we start out with Daniel Malloy, and it's this investigative journalist, and yada, 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 and he's already talked to Louis before, and he gets the tapes in the mail like it's 13 Reasons Why, but not terrible. So then he's like, okay, yeah, I'll come talk to you again, Louis, and fine, we'll do this. And we find out that this is the second time they've talked, and Louis is more comfortable now, and with his sexuality, and I was like, are they gonna go there? Are they gonna go there? And not only did they go there, they went there. Either way, Louis is way more comfortable with himself now, and he's ready to talk and tell the more honest portrayal of this. I also like the nod to the 70s, because this book came out in the 70s. Daniel Malloy, who's the investigative journalist, who already talked to Louis before. So Daniel Malloy, the journalist, he gets to Dubai, and he's like, I loved the line that Louis had of saying, you're standing in it. When he's like, where's your coffin at? I loved that. Now, his little undead keeper. I don't know if that guy's alive. You know, the person you keep alive when you're a vampire to, like, drive you around and keep you safe during daytime hours? I don't know if that kid's a vampire. I doubt he is, because of, you know how Louis is. But, or is he an undead keeper? I don't know. But either way, we get to his Dubai penthouse, hanging out with his little buddy. And he's being very cordial with Daniel Malloy. And then Daniel Malloy plays the tape back of when he gets attacked by Louis, and he's like, you're not understanding my story. Like, that happens at the end of the movie. So their last encounter ended quite angrily, and we get that through him playing the tape for us. Now, remember when we were all super concerned about things? Yeah, no, they address it all. They address everything. They address that he was a slave owner. It's just not in that time period, and I think that moving it forward works, and it works for and I like the way we jumped forward in 2022 also. We're no longer in the 90s or the 70s. We're in 2022. And the way they use the virus, I liked that, because we have enough in our real life with that. So I don't like our media using it like COVID happening a ton. But the way Louis says, traveling with an autoimmune disease during the middle of a pandemic, is that very smart? And so the way they use the pandemic with the story works without it feeling like, hey, I'm trying to shove a message down your throat. I want to hype this up. The way that Jacob Anderson, now I just watched Interview with a Vampire with Mom. She never saw it, the movie, and it's great. There's a gentleness that Brad Pitt and now both Jacob Anderson, there's a gentleness that they bring to Louis, and that's what I was worried about him having or not. I was like, there's something that Brad Pitt just, a kindness that's what makes Louis different. He has compassion. He respects human life. These other ones don't. Like Lestat and Armand, they look at themselves almost as gods. Like, and they're like, we don't care about human life. Are you serious? But Louis respects it. And there's a gentleness that both of these actors have brought. And I can't speak more highly about it. But the way Jacob Anderson sounds and the accent he's using, I absolutely love it. And the fact that Lestat is using a French one, I love it even more. Now, some people were concerned with them depicting Louis as a pimp. And then I was like, oh, he's not a pimp. What happened was, because slavery ended, he couldn't make money like that off the plantation anymore. So he had to start making money off his properties, and those properties ended up becoming the red light district, and he had to accept it or not and become a tough guy on this in this area or not. And I liked the way that they addressed that a little bit better than I had serious concerns about how they were going to depict him. And I was like, no, this is really great. Outside of the way you handled everything, this is just really well done. And I thought that Lestat saying essentially the diversity of all these different people was alluring to him as a hunter. You have to remember that he's talking like a predator. He's like, okay, I see this color, this shade, that shade. I want to see who tastes like what. And it's like, it's supposed to be a dark humor type thing, but I was like, no, that is totally something Lestat would say or do. I could just go on for hours about like the use of, and now I know Louisiana's a big place and New Orleans is a big place in the Anne Rice-averse, but the way they use it storytelling wise on film, on TV is so well done. Like I said, the way they're just, the diversity, the location, both in this story that I love and care about very much, as somebody who loves film, the way they're using those things in the story is flawlessly done. Get a scene where when we get the monologue of how Louis makes his money and what his life is like, there's a situation that happens with one of the sex workers that works for him, and or where at least he picks up money from, and he gets there and this racist pile of trash calls him the N-word, and he's like, do you remember who I am? And so the second that guy hears his full name, he's like, oh shit. Like, so we find out that Louis is a big deal. Now I loved this. When Louis says, you can't afford to look weak in this area, and he has to rough up his brother, who we get introduced to, the camera pans over to show Lestat grinning like a Cheshire cat, and it's great. That is that's storytelling with a camera that is flawlessly done. I loved that. I was like, oh, I can't afford to look weak, but the worst predator you could ever run into has secretly been watching you over here this whole time. I loved it. We get introduced to Paul, which is Louis' brother. Now, I've said this before when I've talked about this book, and when I talked about this in my trailer reactions, I always took it as either in the book when I read it, either in the movie they always say that, or there's a line of dialogue that says Louis' wife and daughter died, and that's what sends him over the edge to acting reckless. But in the book, it's his brother. That passes away, and his brother was super obsessed with church, and that's why Louis not only has a fixation with damnation and being able to redeem himself, but also just like with the church and its imagery in general is because of his brother. And I always love that line in the movie when he says crucifixes. I quite like looking at crucifixes. And when he asks if they can kill them, I love that because it's like a nod to that. In this, we have the brother talking wild outside. Louis can't have that. He snatches him up, has to rough him up a little bit. He's super sad about it. But the way they established these brothers being close, I cried in this episode when the brother does what he does because I was like emotionally attached to this character and and I knew it was coming, and it still hit me in the gut. I was like, well, it was shocking, but I was like, oh my God, like, I'm really sad about this. Because just those actors had so much chemistry together, and this was just really well done. And we get to see throughout the episode this brother really struggling. We find out that he was put into an asylum by their father, and Louis like, that ain't happening on my watch. I'm not allowing that to happen to my brother. And like I said, he just thinks that God and angels are talking to him, but the truth is, no, you're just hearing voices and you're very ill, and nobody knows how to handle it. And I liked the fact that Louis was like, no, and I loved the relationship they established. Introduced to Louis' family, his sister, his mom. I loved seeing this family dynamic. You immediately got the vibe that they were super close, super tight-knit. They really get along with each other. They genuinely love each other. And we find out that the family has no idea how Louis makes money. They just think they make money off these properties. Louis was like, no, I had to adapt to keep my family alive. And somebody was saying that Lestat was going to have to bail him out and it was going to be a white savior issue. Lestat didn't have to bail him out. He bailed himself out. I really liked the way that was all handled was very well done. So we meet this family, we see how they are with each other, it establishes Louis and them as characters. Then he goes to see a sex worker, Miss Lily, that obviously he sees quite often and is, we find out, more friendly with than sexual with, but he goes to a higher end club where black people normally would not be let in. The way they handled that with Lestat saying stuff and then Louis being like, are you trying to be a racist dick right now because I don't think you know who I am? And then Lestat being like, no, I'm hating on the society you live in, not on you. I'm taken with you. And we see how Louis is taken with him. I loved all of that when we got introduced to Lestat. Now I was worried because Tom Cruise, I'm not a huge Tom Cruise fan, but that is one of my favorite characters ever, and I think it's Tom Cruise's best role. So I was waiting for my boy. And I was worried. And after about 2 sentences, I was like, oh no, I like him. I like him a lot. Now, Lestat is just playing games with him. Lestat is just like, watch me leave with your girl that, whatever, this, that, and the other. I can do what I want. I'm Lestat. And him handing his card over. Oh my God, it was great. We get to see someone get killed in the street all quick, and we know Lestat's out, and we think there's this, even back then, and I like the way that they used the virus and the pandemic now, and back during this New Orleans time, and I'm wondering if that's part of the reason they moved the time period forward too, because now they're saying it's whatever fever that was going around, or tuberculosis or something. I don't know exact terms, but the city of New Orleans is like a virus is going around, and that's not a virus. It's Lestat. Well, he is kind of a virus. You feel me? Louis showing up to a card game that Lestat is at. And we get him freezing the whole room, talking in Louis' head, greatness, and the way they established it was great. Like, everybody rubbing their head after, being like a little thrown off. Loved it. Now, the whole thing that Lestat is saying at that table when he freezes everybody and takes the one card and gives it to Louis and takes the other one and puts it in the other guy's hand, the entire thing he's saying is a whole metaphor for what he wants to do in the world, and we do what we want, and we can create whatever we want, and you can do whatever you want. You don't have to conform to what this world is telling you. You have to conform to, and I was loving it. Lestat and Louis start hanging out a lot. I loved did anybody else pick up the vibe that the sister knows Louis is gay? When she was the one who went up to him and was like, Louis, who's this whitey? Who's this French whitey that I hear you're running around with all the time? Why are you hanging out with him? She's the one who says, I want to meet him, bring him to dinner. And that's a total sister move of like, yeah, I want to know who's hanging around my brother. You guys hanging out? I don't care what you are to my brother, but we're going to find out, and you're going to come over for dinner, and I'm going to meet you. Or, like they established in the story, well, that this family is super tight. So she might just want to know who his friends are also. But I was getting a vibe that she like might not know, but she knows, I want to know who is in my brother's life. What was the line that Louis said right after Lestat left the first time? He was like, I walked in only thinking of Miss Lily, but I walked out only thinking of him. So throughout the episode, he's falling for Lestat. They're hanging out. We have him come over for dinner. That got hype real quick. I loved that. His back and forth with the brother, oh my God, it was so good. So we get this family eating dinner, and the brother, who's not well, obviously has Lestat all up in his brain also. Did you guys like realize that? Where it's like on top of him being ill, Lestat's in his head. And so that's why it's even more messed up when he says to Louis when he's walking down the street for the funeral, and he says, believe me, I would know, because he was in his head. So on top of him being ill, Lestat's in his head, and just Lestat, that temper that Lestat lets flare and loses his composure is when his father and his family get brought up. Now, I love The Vampire Lestat. I haven't read it in a few years, but I remember I was like, no, I like this one even more than Interview with the Vampire. That could be just because I love Lestat, but when he goes hard after his, like I said, he's keeping it together until he brings up his dad, and then it's Snapville. And you can tell that this family genuinely doesn't know what to do, and until Louis puts his foot down, is like, cut the shit, dude. But he even says, he's like, oh, even your rattled cage or something. Like, he knows that, he's insinuating that he knows Louis' brother Paul is very ill. Like I was saying with Lestat thinking he's above everybody, he says your God doesn't exist. Adding to Lestat's ego and how he looks at himself above everybody. After the dinner scene, we get the going to hook up with Miss Lily scene. And that's where Louis and Lestat get it on. But there's a ton of stuff leading up to that. There's, first, they're going in to see Miss Lily at the fancy brothel, and we get more of like the Lestat in your head, and you have to remember too, like, Lestat is being extremely manipulative. He's being manipulative at the card game, he's being manipulative in the relationship, he's being manipulative, he's like an abuser. He's being manipulative towards everything. He's goading and baiting Louis into all of this stuff. A few connections to other things, but he tells Lily that this music box he opened up is the only thing he's brought from the old world to America, and it's all he's ever kept with him. And she's like, the tune is beautiful, and he's like, oh really, I wrote it for a boy that I knew, yada yada yada. Well, Louis reminds him an awful lot of that boy he used to know. We get the line from Miss Lily when she says, I told him we just talk, and then Lestat's like, oh, do you just talk, huh? Odd. Throughout it, though, we are cutting back to the interview with Daniel Malloy, and we end up finding out, oh, you met me in a gay bar, and he's like, I've embraced my sexuality more, I'm more comfortable now, besides being more comfortable with the life I live, so I'm here to talk to you. Now, you wouldn't really think this for like a vampire series, but I absolutely loved the family stuff, and I loved the wedding scene. I thought that was really sweet, and it really hit home. And we get tradition and family and how important that is to him, and how everybody's traditions are different. Like, I didn't realize that everybody didn't have a dollar dance at weddings. Like, that's how my aunt, like, paid for her caterer once. Like, I don't know if you guys have that, the dollar dance, when you go up and you give the bride or the groom a dollar and dance with them. Something happened where someone didn't get paid. Something happened at a wedding, I remember, and so my aunt was like, no, we'll just move the dollar dance up, and that's how she paid her caterer. But then I found out, like, not everybody has the dollar dance, so everybody has, like, different traditions, so I liked them showing them. I loved that scene because it just gets so many things across to the audience, like how close they are, how they must have been when they were younger doing this together, how this is a very dedicated thing. Like, there's just so much that those scenes show the audience without saying them to the audience. Even the scene of them crawling up to the roof was like, that's some total sibling shit. Like, no matter what time period, who you are, what color you are, what age you are, it doesn't matter. Like, that scene with them after the wedding, you stayed up till the sun came up with your sibling, you crawled up to the roof to watch the sun come up. Like, that whole thing leading up to a tragedy just felt like such a sibling thing, and they just did it so well. When he says that was the last sunrise I ever saw, I'm like, oh my god, this is so sweet and not sweet and sad. It's a very melancholy story, though. This isn't like jump for joy story. Yeah, when that brother just took a nosedive, there were 2 times I was like, oh my god. Oh my god. And one of them was when the brother walked off the edge. I was like, holy shit. I knew you were going to do this, but I didn't think it was going to be like that. But that was so sad when he says, I love you, Louis. And he's like, I love you too. And then he just goes. I was like, oh my god. But I realized that when he said, do you think, I can't remember the husband's name, who marries the sister, loves her, because Grace needs a lot of love. He's checking on his family. He's like, Louis, I want you to get married next. I want you to do this next. He's telling him, these are the last things I'm going to say to my brother, and I hope you look out for our sister. Like, oh my god, it was beautiful. Just the dialogue back and forth. And then when he did it, I was like, oh my god. In the book, it's a huge theme that the brother is heavy into religion. Right when the church bells ring is when he decides, commits the act and walks off the edge. It's right after the church bells go off. And I was like, oh my god, I see what you did there. But he also told Louis, don't go around Lestat. That's the devil. So it's like, is he not right in the head? Or maybe he does really get premonitions. And maybe that witch joke that he said at the table to his sister when she's like, Mom, he's calling me a witch, is going to connect to the witch series that Anne Rice did that takes place in Louisiana. So maybe we'll find out it was a mental illness and really he could, get premonitions. But either way, you guys know what I'm saying. Now I'm just going down the rabbit hole. Either way, Louis loses his brother, and it's tragic. And he has the funeral, and he's like, the world didn't even blink an eye. Nobody stopped nothing for my brother's funeral. It was just another day of walking down the street. And we have Lestat coming up and trying to talk to him during the funeral, and he's like, get away from me. And that's what I mean about manipulation here. He's honing in on him at a time of weakness. We find out that the mom blames him for the brother's death, and I really loved the line from the sister when she said, she doesn't mean it. She just needs somewhere to put it. And I was like, that's such a great way to say it when somebody's taking something out on you because they don't know what else to do. Just like in the book, this is a huge part as to why Louis is so fixated on redemption and going to heaven and eternal damnation and going to hell. Or is he in hell? Is because of his mom. Well, part of it is when his mom says to him, he can't go to heaven now. He hurt himself. He took himself out. You don't get to heaven for doing that. And that really screws Louis up. When he said, all I wanted was to grieve alone, and he wouldn't let me. Like I said, super manipulative. But we have Lestat in Louis' head during the funeral for his brother, and at a time of weakness, Louis almost succumbs to this. But then he goes to the church, and Lestat seeks him out. Him being changed inside of the church was so, oh my god, it was great. It was so good. But, yeah, so we have Lestat in the church. Jacob Anderson, it was killing it. The screaming for help, all that. I was like, oh my god. Before that, we find out Miss Lily passed away from the virus, and so then he goes to the church. First, he was going to her to be consoled. Now he's at the church, and he's going nuts, and he's like, help me. He's in my head. He's in my head. He's in my head. And all I could think was, wow, this priest already dealt with this with your brother. He's probably panicking. He's probably like, oh god, I better help you because I couldn't help the last one. You're screaming about voices in your head. And then Lestat shows up while he's in the confessional. And I loved the shaking and the screaming. And then we get the other clergy trying to run out the door, slipping in blood. And then Lestat, I'm sorry, this was the only time I was like, what just happened? Was when he punched through somebody's head. But that does establish to the audience the strength Lestat has. So I get it. But still, he punched right through somebody's head. I was like, whoa. And then we have the transformation of Louis. Now, that whole thing with the thudding and everything was right out of the book. Straight off the page. How many times do we get that? How many times do we have book people happy? Super woke people happy? And everybody's happy. When does this doesn't happen. Like, and people who've never known this story or anything can like this too, because it's so good. But all the stuff Louis is saying to in the interview about the heart thudding and everything, that's straight out of the book. Lestat's monologue of "you are loved" and all of that, oh my god, it hit in the gut so hard, and oh my god, I loved it. And him talking about, what if I told you there were no roles you had to conform to? And then when he finally starts sucking his blood out, and we see we see Louis losing color, and then as he drinks from Lestat, he starts gaining the color back. Now, I don't know what it is, but it's not like he's not attractive. Like, Jacob Anderson's an attractive man, obviously. I didn't think he was this attractive during Game of Thrones. And now I'm like, no. Even before you were a vampire, you're super attractive. Throughout the series, they're going to refer to it this way, but the dark gift is eternal life, being a vampire. That's what they call it. And, like, oh my god, I just can't believe... I think this is all over the place, and I hope that this review made sense, because now I'm just going to get into some things like, this is how you do representation correctly, and this is how you establish diversity, and everything like that, and it's done well. And, oh, yeah, we straight up have them banging, dude. These ain't no undertones, because like I've been saying this, it's the same thing as when people talk about Fight Club. I'm like, but have you read it? Because it's extremely homoerotic. And same thing with Interview with a Vampire. It's heavily about that, and there are heavy themes of that. Can you all just enjoy things for a story? Yes. Do things have messages sometimes? Yes. And this just outright put it out there on the table. It didn't undertone it. It didn't insinuate it. Oh no. We're there. We are there. And I love it. If I explain that to you, what does it sound like? If I leave the vampire part out, these two men living together in eternity with each other, with their daughter that they're raising together as a family. It sounds like a gay couple raising their daughter together, right? It's kind of what it sounds like. But like I said, there are huge themes of that. But the fact that they just outright did it in this show, I love it. But then vampires inherently are sexual creatures. Like, just the act of feeding for them once they are vampires is always depicted and described as almost a sexual experience. And the way they talk about intimacy in this, I thought this was beautiful. I really can't speak more highly of this. But isn't it from, like, people who did Breaking Bad? I don't even know. I went straight into my Gothic drawer and started recording as soon as I finished it. I think I might have the second episode. I think it gave me the option to watch it, but I was like, no, we have to talk about this. It's so good. And like I said, I think this was the one thing I was the most concerned about. I was like, I love Interview with a Vampire, the book and the movie. There's a lot of things you're changing up here, and you could really offend some people and do it wrong. Not only is it just good, it's just well done. I am a lover of the book, and it's closer to that than the movie is, and I love the film. But I'm so sorry that I'm so scatterbrained. I just wasn't expecting this greatness. I really wasn't. I really was like, man, something's gonna go wrong, and I'm gonna have to be like, eat my words that I said where I was like, oh yeah, no, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be good. And I'm gonna be like, oh shit, we're gonna have to address this, aren't we? And then, no, this is well written, it's well done, it's beautifully done. But yeah, I'm happy with Motor City Nerds. Like, share, comment, subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. I can't believe we're almost to 1,000. I really appreciate it. I have a Wakanda Forever reaction up. Man, that is one of the best these last two Black Panther 2 trailers have been two of the greatest trailers I've ever seen. So yeah, go check that out. I'm on OF. I'm on, what else am I on? Instagram, TikTok, everything's down below. But yeah, if I have the second episode, I'm going to go watch it. But this is really good. And I love it. Tell me what you think down in the comments. And I'm sure people are going to be like, no, you're wrong. But I'm like, I don't know, you might have, they put a lot into the dialogue they were saying, because there was some stuff that I even missed, and I was like, whoa, We got big monologues. We got big explanations. Can we rewind that one back? But I wanted to flow through it. But then there was a couple things that I wrote down that I went back to be like, wait, what did they say there? And I'm like, oh no, no. And then all the things when I was like, not tons of them, but there was a couple times I was like, did they address that? And I'm like, oh no, they did. And I'm shocked, you guys. I'm shocked. This is so good.